The wrench slipped from my hand and clanged against the pipe under our kitchen sink. From where I lay, sprawled on the grimy linoleum, I could hear my wife Carla's voice floating down from the living room above, honey-sweet and flirtatious, in a way that made my stomach clench. "Oh, Evan, you're so funny," she giggled into her phone. "I can't believe you remember that story from college." Evan. Her ex-boyfriend. The same Evan she'd been just catching up with for the past 3 months. I grabbed the wrench and tightened the fitting with more force than necessary. The pipe groaned in protest, much like I wanted to. But Sam Mitchell wasn't the type to make a scene. At 38, I'd learned to keep my mouth shut and my head down. It's what kept my small moving company afloat in this economy, and what had supposedly kept my marriage stable for 16 years. "Mom's on the phone with Uncle Evan again," my daughter Jess announced as she walked into the kitchen, her voice dripping with teenage sarcasm. At 16, she'd perfected the art of making everything sound like an accusation. "He's not your uncle," I muttered from under the sink. "Whatever, Dad. At least he doesn't grunt at me when I try to have a conversation." I slid out from under the sink and sat up, wiping my hands on an old rag. Jess stood there in her designer jeans and crop top, looking exactly like her mother had 20 years ago. Same blonde hair, same green eyes, same expression of barely concealed contempt. "Your mom's been talking to him a lot lately," I said carefully. Jess rolled her eyes. "God, Dad, you're so insecure. Mom deserves to have friends. Just because you don't have any doesn't mean she can't." The words hit harder than they should have. It was true. Most of my old friends had drifted away over the years. Work, family, life had gotten in the way. But Carla? Carla had always been social, always surrounded by people who laughed at her jokes and hung on her every word. "I'm not insecure," I said, standing up and brushing off my jeans. "I just think it's weird that a married woman spends hours on the phone with her ex-boyfriend." "They're friends, Dad. Friends. Maybe if you tried being friendly instead of walking around here like a grumpy old man, Mom wouldn't need to talk to other people." Before I could respond, Carla appeared in the doorway. At 36, she was still stunning, the kind of woman who turned heads at the grocery store and made other husbands wonder what they'd done wrong. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite it being a Saturday afternoon. She wore a silk blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Who are we talking about?" she asked, sliding her phone into her purse with a satisfied smile. "Dad's being paranoid about Uncle Evan again," Jess said. "He's not her uncle," I repeated, more firmly this time. Carla's smile faltered slightly. "Sam, we've been through this. Evan and I are friends. We have history, yes, but that's all it is. History. History that you seem to be reliving every night on the phone. I talk to lots of people. It's called having a social life." She moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of wine, expensive stuff that I definitely hadn't bought. "Maybe you should try it sometime." The casual dismissal in her voice made my jaw clench. This was how all our conversations went lately. I'd express a concern, she'd brush it off, and somehow I'd end up feeling like the unreasonable one. "I work 60 hours a week to keep this family afloat," I said. "Forgive me if I don't have time for wine tastings and gallery openings. No one's asking you to change, Sam, but don't expect me to become a hermit just because you've given up on life." Jess snorted. "Burn." "That's enough," I snapped, but they were already walking away, Carla's heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she headed upstairs. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the sound of their laughter drifting down from Carla's home office. The same office where she spent most of her evenings lately, door closed, voice low and intimate as she talked to God knows who. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank, my old boxing coach and the closest thing I had to a friend these days. "Beer tonight? You sound like you need it." I did need it, more than I cared to admit. "Yeah, O'Malley's at 8. Bring your gloves. Might do you some good to hit something." Frank always knew exactly what to say. At 55, he'd seen it all. Broken marriages, broken dreams, broken men who thought they could fix everything with their fists. He'd taught me that sometimes the smartest thing you could do was walk away from a fight. But he'd also taught me that some fights were worth having. I looked up at the ceiling, where I could still hear Carla's voice, animated and happy in a way she never sounded when talking to me anymore. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, a feeling I'd been trying to ignore for months. Maybe it was time to stop walking away. O'Malley's hadn't changed in the 20 years I'd been going there. Same sticky floors, same neon beer signs, same smell of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Frank was already at our usual table in the back, nursing a beer and watching the Red Sox lose on the ancient TV mounted above the bar. "You look like hell," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. "Thanks. You always know how to make a guy feel better." Frank studied me with the same intensity he'd once used to analyze my footwork in the ring. He'd been a decent fighter in his day, never made it big, but good enough to know the difference between someone who was tired and someone who was beaten. "It's the wife," he said. It wasn't a question. I took a long pull from the beer he'd ordered for me. "She's been talking to her ex, a lot." "How much is a lot?" "Every day, sometimes for hours." Frank nodded slowly. "What's your gut telling you?" "That I'm losing my mind, that I'm being paranoid, that maybe Jess is right, and I really am just a grumpy old man who doesn't deserve what he has." "That's your head talking. What's your gut saying?" I closed my eyes and tried to quiet the noise in my brain, the self-doubt, the rationalizations, the desperate hope that I was wrong about everything, that she's cheating on me. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Saying them out loud made them real in a way that thinking them never had. "So, what are you going to do about it?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Carla. "Out with Allie tonight. Don't wait up." Allie was Carla's best friend and law partner, a sharp-tongued woman who'd never liked me much. They'd been inseparable since law school, and lately their girls' nights had become more frequent. "Let me guess," Frank said, reading my expression. "She's going out. Girls' night with Allie. On a Saturday night, when most married couples spend time together." I felt something twist in my stomach. "You think I should follow her?" "I think you should find out what's really going on, one way or another." We sat in silence for a while, watching the Sox blow a 3-run lead. Around us, the usual Saturday night crowd was settling in. Construction workers, mechanics, guys like me who worked with their hands and came here to forget about their problems for a few hours. "I used to think I knew her," I said finally. 16 years of marriage, and I thought I knew everything about her. Her favorite coffee, the way she likes her eggs, the face she makes when she's concentrating on a case. But lately, it's like I'm living with a stranger. "People change," Frank said. "Question is whether they change together or apart." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from Instagram. Carla had posted a photo. I opened it and felt my blood pressure spike. She was at some upscale restaurant downtown, looking radiant in a black dress I'd never seen before. But she wasn't with Allie. She was with a tall, dark-haired man in an expensive suit. The caption read, "Catching up with old friends. Life is good." I knew that face. Evan Morrison, real estate developer, her college boyfriend, the man she'd almost married before she met me, the man she'd been talking to every night for months. "Son of a bitch," I whispered. Frank leaned over to look at my phone. "That your wife?" "That's my wife on a date with her ex-boyfriend while she told me she was out with her best friend." "Well," Frank said, draining his beer. "Now you know." The drive home was a blur of rage and adrenaline. I kept thinking about that photo, the way Carla was looking at Evan, the happiness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in months. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. I was going to confront her, tonight. But first, I needed proof. Real proof, not just a social media post that could be explained away. I let myself into the house quietly. Jess was out with friends, and the place felt empty and cold. I went straight to Carla's home office, my heart pounding as I tried the door handle. Locked. She'd never locked that door before, not once in all the years we'd lived here. I stood there for a moment, staring at the brass handle, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't insecurity or jealousy or any of the other things she'd accused me of. This was betrayal. I went to our bedroom and opened Carla's jewelry box, where she kept spare keys. My hands were shaking as I found the small silver key and made my way back to the office. The door opened with a soft click. Her laptop was closed on the desk, but her phone charger was plugged in next to it. She must have forgotten it in her rush to get ready for her girls' night. I sat down in her chair and opened the laptop. Password protected, of course. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, Jess's birthday. Nothing. Then, on a hunch, I tried Evan, 1987. His name and the year they'd graduated college. The screen unlocked. What I found in her email and text messages made my stomach turn. Months of flirtatious exchanges, intimate photos, detailed plans for secret meetings, and worse, much worse, conversations about me. Sam doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy feeling sorry for himself to notice what's right in front of him. I can't keep pretending to be happy. This marriage has been dead for years. When are you going to leave him? Soon. I just need to figure out the logistics. The house, Jess, the business. I want to make sure I don't lose anything important. I sat back in the chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Important. After 16 years of marriage, I wasn't important enough to fight for. I was just a logistics problem to be solved. My phone buzzed. A text from Carla. Having such a wonderful time. Wish you were here. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was lying to my face while sitting across from another man, planning our divorce over dinner and wine. I took screenshots of everything. The texts, the emails, the photos. Then I closed the laptop and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. As I locked the office door behind me, I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. The man who'd walked into this room 20 minutes ago, the man who'd spent months making excuses for his wife's behavior, who'd believed her lies and accepted her dismissals, that man was gone. In his place was someone I barely recognized, someone who was done being taken for a fool, someone who was ready to fight back. Carla came home at 2 a.m, reeking of wine and expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I pretended to be asleep as she stumbled through her nighttime routine, humming softly to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. The next morning, she was all smiles and casual affection, making coffee and asking about my plans for the day as if she hadn't spent the previous evening planning my destruction. I had such a nice time with Allie last night, she said, not meeting my eyes. We went to that new place downtown. You know, the one with the jazz band? Sounds fun, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Did you take any pictures? She hesitated for just a moment. Oh, you know how Allie is about photos. She's convinced she's not photogenic. Another lie, delivered with the same casual ease as asking me to pass the sugar. I saw your Instagram post, I said. You looked beautiful. Her face went pale. Oh, that. Yes, well, we ran into some old friends from law school. You know how it is. Old friends. Right. She studied my face, looking for signs that I knew more than I was letting on. But I'd had all night to practice this performance, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Sam, is everything okay? You seem different. Just tired. Long week. She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Carla was smart. Too smart to be fooled for long. But she was also arrogant, and arrogance makes people sloppy. I'm going to be working late again tonight, she said. Big case coming up. Of course you are. After she left for the office, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and made a list. If Carla wanted to play games, I'd play along, but I was going to make sure I won. First, I called my lawyer, not the family attorney Carla and I had used for our wills and house purchase, but a divorce specialist Frank had recommended years ago when his own marriage fell apart. "Sam Mitchell," I said when the receptionist answered. "I need to speak with David Park. It's urgent." David was a small, intense man with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. His office was spartanly furnished. No family photos, no personal touches, just law books and the tools of his trade. "How long have you suspected?" he asked after I'd laid out the situation. "Months, but I only got proof last night." I showed him the screenshots I'd taken from Carla's laptop. He studied them with professional detachment, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is good," he said finally. "Very good. Adultery isn't grounds for divorce in Massachusetts anymore, but it can certainly influence asset division and custody arrangements, especially when there's evidence of planning and deception." "What do you mean?" "Your wife is a lawyer. She knows exactly what she's doing here. Look at this text about logistics and making sure she doesn't lose anything important. She's not just cheating on you. She's strategically positioning herself for a divorce that leaves her with everything and you with nothing." The cold feeling in my chest spread. Can she do that? She can try. But now that we know what she's planning, we can plan too. The question is, how far are you willing to go? I thought about 16 years of marriage, of building a life together, of all the dreams we'd shared. Then I thought about her laughing with Evan last night while texting me lies. "As far as it takes." David smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Good. Here's what we're going to do." The plan he outlined was elegant in its simplicity. While Carla thought she was playing chess, we'd be playing a completely different game. She wanted to control the narrative, control the timeline, control the outcome. We were going to take all of that away from her. "The key," David explained, "is patience. Let her think she's in control while we gather more evidence and position ourselves strategically. When we're ready to move, it'll be swift and decisive." "How long?" "A few weeks, maybe a month. Can you maintain the pretense that long?" I thought about going home to her lies, her fake smiles, her casual cruelty disguised as concern. "Yeah," I said, "I can do that." But first, I had some reconnaissance to do. Evan Morrison lived in a luxury condo complex downtown, the kind of place that screamed successful bachelor, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and doorman in a fancy uniform. I parked across the street and waited. At 6:30, Carla's BMW pulled into the visitor parking area. She told me she was working late. Instead, she was here, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the black dress from last night's Instagram post. I watched her disappear into the building, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Part of me wanted to march up there and confront them both, to drag the truth out into the open and force her to face what she'd done. But David's voice echoed in my head. Patience. So I waited. And I watched. And I took photos. 2 hours later, Carla emerged from the building. Her hair was mussed, her lipstick gone, and she was laughing at something Evan had said. He walked her to her car, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They kissed goodnight like lovers, not old friends catching up. I followed her home at a distance, arriving just minutes after she did. By the time I walked through the front door, she was already in her office with the door closed, probably cleaning up any evidence of where she'd really been. "How was work?" I called out. "Exhausting," she called back. "I'm just finishing up some notes and then I'll be right there." More lies. Effortless, casual lies that rolled off her tongue like water. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a scotch, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank. How'd it go with the lawyer? Better than expected. Want to grab dinner tomorrow? I have a story to tell. Can't wait. And Sam, whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it afterward. I looked up at the ceiling, where I could hear Carla moving around in her office, probably crafting her next set of lies. Could I live with what I was planning? I thought about the way she'd looked at Evan tonight, the way she'd kissed him, the way she'd texted me sweet lies while planning my destruction. Yeah, I could live with it just fine. 3 weeks later, I had enough evidence to bury Carla and Evan both. Photos, text messages, credit card receipts from restaurants and hotels. David had been thorough, hiring a private investigator who documented their affair with professional precision. But evidence wasn't enough anymore. I wanted them to suffer the way I'd suffered. I wanted them to feel the humiliation, the betrayal, the casual cruelty they'd inflicted on me. I wanted revenge. The opportunity came on a Friday night. Carla announced she was going to another work function, a charity gala for the local children's hospital. She'd even bought a new dress for the occasion, a stunning red number that probably cost more than most people made in a month. You should come, she said, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror. It's for a good cause. You know I hate those things, I replied, playing my part perfectly. All that small talk and fake smiling. You go have fun. She kissed my cheek, leaving a red mark that felt like a brand. I'll try not to be too late. Of course, she wasn't really going to a charity gala. According to my private investigator, she and Evan had reservations at the most expensive restaurant in the city, followed by a night at the Ritz-Carlton. But I had my own plans for the evening. At 7 o'clock, I called Jess down to the living room. She appeared in her usual uniform of designer jeans and attitude, clearly annoyed at being pulled away from her phone. What's up, Dad? I'm supposed to meet friends at the mall. Sit down, Jess. We need to talk. Something in my tone must have gotten through to her because she actually put her phone down and looked at me directly. Your mother is having an affair, I said without preamble. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then white again. That's not true, she whispered. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. Carla and Evan at dinner, holding hands across the table. Carla and Evan entering the hotel. Carla and Evan kissing in the parking garage. Dad, no, Jess said, tears starting to flow. She wouldn't. She loves you. She loves us. She loves herself, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. And she loves the life Evan can give her. We're just obstacles to be removed. I showed her the text messages, the ones where Carla talked about me like I was a piece of furniture she was tired of looking at, the ones where she discussed how to minimize the impact of divorce on her lifestyle and career. Jess read them in stunned silence, her face crumpling with each revelation. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. But you deserve to know the truth. What are you going to do? She asked through her tears. I'm going to make sure she doesn't destroy this family without consequences. At 8 o'clock, I drove to the restaurant where Carla and Evan were having their romantic dinner. The maitre d' recognized me from the photo I'd shown him earlier that week, when I'd made my own reservation. Table for one, I said. I believe you have something special prepared. He led me to a table with a perfect view of the corner booth where Carla and Evan sat, lost in their own little world. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't notice me at first. I ordered the most expensive bottle of champagne on the menu and waited. The plan was simple, elegant, and completely legal. I'd spent weeks setting it up, calling in favors and making arrangements. Now it was time to execute. At 8:30, the first surprise arrived. Mrs. Dalton, our nosy neighbor, appeared at the restaurant entrance with her husband and another couple. They were dressed in their Sunday best, clearly out for a special evening. I'd mentioned to Mrs. Dalton earlier that week that Carla would be at this restaurant tonight celebrating a big case win. Mrs. Dalton loved gossip almost as much as she loved being the first to know things, so naturally she'd arranged her own dinner here to accidentally run into Carla. The look on Carla's face when she spotted Mrs. Dalton was priceless. Pure panic, followed quickly by desperate calculation. She couldn't hide, Mrs. Dalton had already seen her, but she also couldn't explain why she was here with Evan instead of at a work function. I watched from across the room as Carla tried to manage the situation, introducing Evan as a colleague and making awkward small talk while Mrs. Dalton's sharp eyes took in every detail: the intimate seating arrangement, the expensive wine, the way Evan's hand rested on Carla's arm. But that was just the opening act. At 9 o'clock, the second wave arrived. Allie walked into the restaurant with her own date, a woman I didn't recognize. This wasn't part of my plan. This was just beautiful cosmic timing. Allie spotted Carla immediately, and her face went through the same range of emotions I'd been experiencing for weeks: confusion, realization, and finally, fury. Because Allie was in love with Carla, had been for years, according to the private investigator, and seeing Carla with Evan, seeing her throw away her marriage for a man, was more than Allie could bear. The confrontation was spectacular. Allie marched over to Carla's table, her voice carrying across the restaurant as she demanded to know what the hell was going on. Carla tried to calm her down, but Allie was beyond reason. I didn't look back as I stepped into the cool night air, but the sounds followed me anyway: raised voices, the sharp crack of a chair tipping, someone hissing, "Oh my God," a little too loudly. The valet avoided my eyes as he hurried to bring my car around, already aware that whatever had just happened inside wasn't going to stay inside for long. By the time I slid into the driver's seat, my phone was vibrating nonstop in the cup holder. I didn't need to look to know what it was. In a town this size, spectacle traveled faster than truth, and tonight had been pure spectacle. I pulled out of the lot and drove aimlessly for a few minutes, letting the adrenaline bleed off. My hands were steady on the wheel, steadier than they'd been in months. That surprised me. I'd imagined confronting Carla 100 different ways in my head: angry, broken, pleading, cold. I hadn't imagined indifference mixed with something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. At a red light, I finally glanced at my phone. Missed calls, texts, dozens of notifications from platforms I barely used anymore. Someone had tagged me in the video, probably thinking they were being helpful or cruel or both. I didn't open it. I didn't need to see Carla's face to know what it looked like. I'd seen it when our eyes met. Shock, fear. The sudden realization that the story she'd been writing no longer belonged to her. When I got home, the house was dark and quiet. Too quiet, maybe, but it no longer felt oppressive. It felt temporary. I poured myself a drink and sat at the kitchen island, the same place Carla used to sit scrolling through listings for houses we might buy someday, houses that always seemed to get bigger the more dissatisfied she became. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. "Sam?" Allie's voice came through, breathless and shaking, but fierce. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to see it like that, but I couldn't let her—" "You did exactly what needed to be done," I said calmly. "Thank you." There was a pause. "Are you okay?" I considered the question honestly. "I think I am, more than I've been in a long time." "She's losing it," Allie said. Evan left. Carla locked herself in the bathroom. Half the restaurant was filming. I think someone called her firm. I closed my eyes briefly. "Good." "You're sure about this?" Allie asked gently. "Once it's out there, there's no pulling it back." "That's kind of the point," I replied. "She's been rewriting reality for months. Tonight, it caught up." After we hung up, I set the phone face down and finished my drink. Phase 1. I'd chosen that phrase deliberately because this wasn't about humiliation for its own sake. It was about leverage, about making sure Carla couldn't quietly spin me into the villain while she walked away with sympathy, assets, and a new life polished clean of accountability. By morning, the local blogs had picked it up. By noon, one of the legal gossip sites had run a headline that made my jaw tighten despite myself. Carla's firm released a carefully worded statement about conduct under review. Evan, apparently, had deleted his social media entirely. Carla called me 13 times before I finally answered. "Why would you do this?" she demanded, her voice cracked and raw. "Why would you humiliate me like that?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at a perfectly ordinary afternoon. "I didn't humiliate you, Carla. I stopped protecting you." "You blindsided me," she snapped. "You knew this would destroy everything." "I knew it would reveal everything," I corrected. "There's a difference." "You could have talked to me," she said, desperation creeping in. "We could have handled this privately." I laughed softly, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. "Privately? Like you handled Evan privately? Like you handled planning the divorce privately while sleeping next to me?" Silence stretched on the line. "What do you want?" she asked finally. The question told me everything. Not apology, not remorse, negotiation. "I want a clean divorce," I said. "No games, no smear campaigns, no trying to bleed me dry because you think you deserve more." "And if I don't agree?" she said. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Then phase 2 gets very uncomfortable." Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "You really planned this?" "I had to," I said. "You didn't leave me a choice." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I'd won, this wasn't over, but because the balance had shifted. Carla had spent years believing she was untouchable, that charm and ambition could smooth over anything. Tonight proved otherwise. Phase 1 had never been about revenge. It was about making sure the truth got a seat at the table. And tomorrow, phase 2 would make sure it stayed there. Carla didn't come home that night. Or the next morning. Her car wasn't in the driveway when I left for work, and her side of the bed was untouched. Jess was waiting for me in the kitchen when I got home Monday evening, her face streaked with tears and her phone clutched in her hand. "Everyone at school is talking about it," she said without preamble. "The video is everywhere. People are commenting, sharing it, making memes. I can't go anywhere without someone asking me about Mom's affair." I sat down across from her at the kitchen table. "I'm sorry, Jess. I never wanted you to be hurt by this. But you planned it, didn't you? The restaurant thing. You knew those people would be there." There was no point in lying to her anymore. "Yes, I planned it." "Why? Why couldn't you just talk to her? Try to work it out?" I showed her more of the text messages I'd found, the ones where Carla discussed how to minimize my role in Jess's life after the divorce, how she planned to move across the country with Evan, taking Jess with her and leaving me with supervised visitation rights. "She wasn't planning to work it out, sweetheart. She was planning to take you away from me and start a new life where I didn't exist." Jess read the messages in silence, her face hardening with each revelation. "She was going to take me away from you?" That was the plan. Without asking me what I wanted? Without asking either of us. Jess set her phone down on the table with deliberate care. When she looked up at me, I saw something new in her eyes, a cold anger that reminded me uncomfortably of myself. "What else are you planning, Dad?" "What do you mean? I know you. You're not done. The restaurant was just the beginning, wasn't it?" She was right, of course. I wasn't done, not even close. "There's going to be a town council meeting tomorrow night," I said, "about the proposed development project downtown, the one Evan's been pushing for months." "What does that have to do with anything?" "Your mother has been using her position at the law firm to help Evan navigate the approval process, sharing confidential information, using her connections to smooth the way. It's a conflict of interest at best, corruption at worst." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been documenting everything, every meeting, every phone call, every email, and tomorrow night I'm going to share it all with the town council and the local press." Jess stared at me for a long moment. You're going to destroy her career. She destroyed our family. I'm just returning the favor. The town council meeting was held in the high school auditorium, the same place where Jess had performed in school plays and I'd attended parent-teacher conferences. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived early and took a seat in the back, watching as the usual suspects filed in, local business owners, concerned citizens, a few reporters from the weekly newspaper. The development project was controversial, and the meeting was well attended. Carla arrived with Evan and several other lawyers from her firm. She looked haggard, her usual polish dimmed by stress and sleepless nights. Our eyes met briefly across the room, and I saw fear there. Good. The council went through the usual preliminaries, reading minutes, old business, committee reports. Finally, they reached the main event, Evan's development proposal. He gave a polished presentation about job creation and economic development, complete with architectural renderings and economic impact studies. Several council members asked softball questions that he answered with practiced ease. Then it was time for public comment. I stood up and walked to the microphone, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Good evening. My name is Sam Mitchell, and I'm here to discuss some concerns about this development proposal. I could see Carla shifting nervously in her seat, whispering urgently to the lawyer next to her. Specifically, I continued, I'm concerned about the cozy relationship between the developer and certain members of the legal community who are supposed to be providing objective counsel to this council. I pulled out a folder thick with documents and began reading. Email exchanges between Carla and Evan discussing strategy for the council meetings. Text messages where she shared confidential information about other council members' positions. Phone records showing dozens of calls between them during business hours, ostensibly about the project, but clearly personal in nature. The room erupted. Council members demanded to see the documents. Reporters surged forward with cameras and microphones. Evan's face went purple with rage. "This is a personal attack," he shouted. "Sam Mitchell is a bitter, jealous husband trying to sabotage a legitimate business deal." "You're right," I said, my voice carrying over the chaos. "I am bitter, and jealous, and angry, but that doesn't make these documents any less real or this corruption any less serious." I handed copies of everything to the council members and the press, then walked calmly back to my seat while the room exploded around me. Carla was on her feet, her face white with shock and fury. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but the damage was done. The evidence was overwhelming and everyone in the room could see it. The council voted unanimously to table the development proposal pending a full investigation. The newspaper reporters were already typing on their phones, breaking the story in real time. As people filed out of the auditorium, Carla finally approached me. We stood in the empty hallway where Jess had once shown me her science fair projects, facing each other like strangers. "You've destroyed everything," she said, her voice hollow. "No," I replied. "You did that. I just made sure everyone could see it. What do you want, Sam? What will it take for you to stop this?" "I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to know what it's like to have someone you trust betray you completely. I want you to understand that actions have consequences." "And then what? We all just live in the wreckage you've created?" I pulled out the divorce papers David had prepared weeks ago. "Then we end this properly. No lies, no manipulation, no attempts to take everything I've worked for. A clean break." She took the papers with shaking hands. "And if I don't sign? Then I release the rest of what I have. The hotel receipts, the photos, the text messages where you and Evan laugh about what a fool I am. All of it goes public and your career won't just be damaged. It'll be over." Carla read through the divorce settlement with the practiced eye of a lawyer. It was fair but firm. Joint custody of Jess, an equitable split of assets, no alimony given her adultery and professional misconduct. "You've thought of everything," she said finally. "I had good teachers." She looked up at me then, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Young, vulnerable, uncertain about the future. I never meant for it to happen this way, Sam. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every day for months you hurt me, and you enjoyed it. She couldn't deny it because we both knew it was true. I'll sign the papers, she said quietly. But I want you to know that I did love you once. That meant something, even if it doesn't now. Yeah, I said, taking the signed papers from her hands. It did. I walked out of the high school and into the parking lot, where Frank was waiting by his truck. How'd it go? He asked. It's over. How do you feel? I thought about it as we stood there in the cool evening air, listening to the sound of cars starting up and people driving home to their families. Empty, I said finally, but clean. Frank nodded. That's how it starts. The feeling clean part, I mean. The empty gets better with time. Does it? Yeah, it does. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Carla's law firm had quietly asked for her resignation after the ethics investigation concluded. Evan's development deal was permanently killed, and he'd moved to Florida to start over. Jess lived with me during the week and spent weekends with her mother, who was working at a small firm in the next town over. It wasn't the life any of us had planned, but it was honest. I was closing up the office at my moving company one evening when my phone rang. Unknown number. Sam Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 5 News. I'm doing a follow-up story on the Morrison development controversy, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment. No comment, I said, and hung up. Some stories don't need follow-ups. Some endings are exactly what they appear to be. I locked the office door and walked out to my truck, where Frank was waiting to drive us to the gym. At 55, he was still teaching young men how to fight and older men how to know when the fight was over. Ready? He asked. Yeah, I said, climbing into the passenger seat. I'm ready. We drove through the familiar streets of our small New England town, past the restaurant where I'd watched my marriage end, past the high school where I'd finally fought back, past the house where Carla and I had once believed we'd grow old together. None of it hurt anymore. The betrayal, the lies, the casual cruelty, it all felt like something that had happened to someone else, in another life. I'd set out to make Carla pay for what she'd done to me, to our family, to the trust I'd placed in her. And I'd succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. She'd lost her career, her reputation, her comfortable life, and her plans for the future. But somewhere along the way, I'd gained something more valuable than revenge. I'd gained my self-respect back. And that, I realized as we pulled into the gym parking lot, was worth more than all the satisfaction in the world. They wanted a villain. I gave them what they deserved.